if you could speak about this, there's been a lot of developments, and you went over quite a number of them, and I believe there's been even more of an update on some of the potential hurdles for
Yes,
BRICS. So first, there was, of course, South Africa, and it is the host of the BRICS summit upcoming next month. And the national security foreign minister, they met recently in South Africa, but it was reiterated that Vladimir Putin should not come in person, and he will attend the actual BRICS summit, the Leaders Summit, online. Russia will be represented by Sergei Lavrov. So this was South
yes,
Africa giving way to pressure from the West on the Rome Statute, the ICC basically saying that Vladimir Putin should be arrested if he touches down on any
exactly.
signatory of the ICC. So with that, could you talk about some of these problems coming up? Because they also have to do with the currency discussion. I know India and Brazil and South Africa, they've all expressed some hesitation to the implementation of a new currency. And so this leads to your column about BRICS problems. These are some problems internally among the BRICS bloc. And you even said so far as to say that this shows some weaknesses that BRICS has as a geopolitical leader,
Yeah.
while the geoeconomic realm in terms of BRI and BRICS as well, that's moving forward at a breakneck speed. So could you talk about this contradiction and what you think about it?
Well, Danny, this is something we could spend the rest of the day talking about it because it's very complex. Very, and it's for us, it's an enormous challenge to put this in only a few paragraphs. I have had off the record discussions with Russians, especially some Chinese, and a few Europeans about the problems. There's a sort of there is a sort of consensus. Basically, if the internal geopolitical problems inflicted from the outside on some BRICS and their internal squabbles, which is the case of especially China and India, are not solved, this is essential to proceed. And it's extremely complex because it involves virtually unsolvable problems like the rivalry between China and India, where Russia plays always the role of a messenger, of an enlightened messenger that is trusted by both sides. And of course, outside interference, as we saw in the case of South Africa and Putin's visit. Because, fabled hybrid war techniques applied forcefully over Pretoria, Johannesburg, and because they are the weakest link inside the BRICS, they had to give up. There was no way they could find a compromise solution. No way. And they knew it. The Russians and the Chinese knew it. And obviously, the usual suspects knew it. So in the end, they found a compromise, which I would say the Russians reluctantly agreed because Putin wanted to go to South Africa. He was ready to defy all this bullshit and fly to South Africa, protected by, obviously, the best of Russian Air Force. But in the end, they found that, okay, let's adopt the compromise. We're going to have Lavrov personally, physically representing Putin at the summit, and Putin by video conference in everything that matters. And of course, putting the Russian official stamp on every major decision that matters by video conference. In terms of spelling it out graphically, especially to the global south, how hard is the game? That's it. That's it. Everybody knows. And the Africans know it, and the rest of the global south, they know it as well. The discussion that really matters, which is the financial, and trade settlement discussion, it's still very incipient. And this is something that I had from BRICS Sherpas, the guys who got together 2 or 3 weeks ago to start discussing, okay, how are we going to organize the summit? How are we going to organize who's going to be admitted? Is there going to be a 1 tier, 2 tiers, 3 tiers, long term? How do we plan all that? Discussions, how do we organize the panels, etc. And of course, the discussion about a new currency. There was a lot of speculation all over about that. So what we can say for sure now, and I bet a zillion percent on that, is that the BRICS are not going to announce a new currency next month in South Africa. First of all, because they haven't even studied the details. It's impossible. Second, because you cannot start a new currency just like that. It's a process that could take as long as 10 years. What they are doing, and they're going to start improving on it, is trade settlements using their own BRICS member currencies and expanded to BRICS Plus. We still don't know if BRICS Plus starting this year is going to be BRICS 7, BRICS 8, BRICS 10, etc. But whatever that is, BRICS Plus, they're going to start trading and increasing trade among themselves in their national bilateral trade in their national currencies. This will lead later on, and this later on could be in a span of 1, 2, 3, 5, or even 10 years, to maybe a new currency, which is going to be basically a trade settlement currency and not a currency like, for instance, the euro or the British pound. Something completely different, a trade settlement mechanism capable of bypassing the US dollar ecosystem, which, it's all over the world. It's very hard to escape it, right? So this is where we're going on the financial new currency front. On the geopolitical front, of course, it's much easier, it's much faster, because they already know that we have a list of as many as 30 countries who are dying to be part of BRICS Plus. We have to make a selection. We have to agree among the 5 of ourselves first how it's going to proceed. And then when we have other full members, assuming, for instance, let's assume that we're going to have Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the Emirates, and Egypt, for instance, as some of the new BRICS Plus members. We're going to have a heavy tilt towards West Asia. That's very, very important. And to energy producers. So we can have, for instance, energy producers having a much more incisive role inside BRICS than currently Brazil and South Africa enjoy, for instance. So there's going to be a new balance of powers inside BRICS. This is something that could happen quite soon. In terms of the weak nodes, that's very complicated as well, because we can say that India may not be a weak node, but India is the wobbly node. And we can, the Russians and the Chinese talk among themselves. We can never trust what the Indians are going to do next. That's very complicated geopolitically. And the weak nodes, as we know, for now everybody knows, are Brazil and South Africa. South Africa for all the reasons, including the Putin visit, and Brazil, because Brazil basically got a list from the Straussian Neocon cycles, represented by Jake Sullivan, in person in Brasilia, of everything that the Lula government has to do, or else. This was late last year. So the margin of maneuver of President Lula is very, very slim, and he has to be extremely careful. He can do it. He's a master of equilibrium. But it's very complicated and reduces the margin of maneuver and influence of Brazil inside the BRICS, and even outside in terms of being a paragon, a model for the global south. The BRICS Bank, that's very, very important. Dilma visited Putin. She had a special audience with Putin. That was very, very interesting. I was reading the transcript of course, of what was... there were no leaks about their, let's put it this way, more or less secret conversation. The only thing that we could read was the transcript of their official introductions to each other, which were very effective, because Dilma, she told me personally, she loves Putin. She thinks Putin is fantastic. And their interaction was always very, very good. And Putin greatly admires Dilma. That's also very important. So they remember, for instance, that the discussions about bypassing the US dollar, they picked up speed at the BRICS summit in Brazil in 2014. Both in their official introduction mentioned that. That's very, very important. This means that they are in sync and they know exactly where they're coming from. This was 9 years ago, remember, which in politics is an eternity. But Dilma also said something very, very important, which obviously was misrepresented by Brazilian mainstream media. There are not going to be any NDB projects or loans involving Russia. Of course not. Russia doesn't need the BRICS Development Bank. Russia is one of the major providers of capital for the new development bank. So this is Russia capital is involved in distributing and granting loans to countries that really need it. And she also said something, once again, something very important in terms of they are inside the NDB, they are trying to diversify loans and financing in other currencies by passing the dollar and the euro. And the problem is that the target is very, very modest, 30%, which is not enough. It should be by now over 50%. So they're proceeding very cautiously inside the NDB because they know that they are being scrutinized by the comas, by IMF, World Bank, US Department of Justice, the whole apparatus of sanctions, etc. So the NDB, they cannot grant loans to countries that would be subjected to American sanctions for whatever the reason. After all, this is the rules-based international order. We change the rules anytime we want, right? So they have to be very, very careful. And the NDB, they're still affirming themselves as a credible multilateral organization geared and focused on the global south. So we understand how Dilma is being very, very cautious. And of course, they discussed that in detail in their closed-door meeting, Dilma and Putin. So we can expect from the NDB more or less slow progress from now on. For instance, in one of my columns this week, I was wondering why the NDB does not grant loans to Syria for Syrian reconstruction. Once again, American sanctions. Syria is completely sanctioned. So the NDB officially cannot do it. So it has to be through other mechanisms by Iran, by China, by Russia and others to finance Syrian reconstruction. So that's the difference between the geo-economic approach of the NDB and the geopolitical approach of BRICS and BRICS Plus. I hope I managed to explain at least the basics for all you guys. It's an extremely complex matter, and we didn't even get into how hard it is to design a new currency.
Yes, I'm sure we could talk about that for many conversations and streams. Maybe given that the currency you mentioned is quite a ways away, you mentioned that in your call, you mentioned it here. But even so, even if that's the case, I think your points about how significant all of this still is geopolitically and, of course, economically is very well noted. And I think one of the biggest stories about the summit coming up is the potential for new members to be added to BRICS Plus, for there to be a mechanism for membership. I know that on the Russian side, there's been a lot of talks in pressers from foreign ministry spokespeople talking about this being something that needs to be discussed. How do you see the actual results from the BRICS summit shaping out? Like, do you think that there will be a mechanism for new membership? And then from your conversations with with people on the inside. Like, how do you think that could work? Maybe it's not so easy to foresee it, but how do you think, given all of these complications, new membership may work? Because even the prospects of Iran, Saudi Arabia, certain countries in Latin America, I know you said Argentina is having some trouble with even the prospect of joining.
Exactly.
But if they do join, the smoke will come out of the the ears of the neocons and the unilateralists, and of course the hegemon, the United States. So that alone. So I think that's why some people, I think, get a little stuck on the if there's no currency, it's not so important. But even just the idea of these countries joining gets them real hot, gets the hegemon real hot. So how do you think this will play out?
Well, they are already freaking out, Danny. Big time. And they know that much more in several aspects than the Russia-Africa summit this week. The BRICS summit next month is going to be, this is mega game-changing. They discussed, for instance, the meeting earlier this week, on cybersecurity and national security, where this was fantastic because it was the first time after all those meetings that they had in the past that Wang Yi and Patrushev met in person, and Wang Yi back as Chinese foreign ministry after that absolutely crazy episode with the former minister Xinjiang. And I talked to my Hong Kong sources. There are all sorts of rumors going around about why he was sidelined, which in Chinese terms is a major loss of face. Everything, including an affair that he had with the British agent in Hong Kong, to the fact that he was not effective enough for Xi Jinping, and everything in between. The fact is, no one really knows what happened. For the moment, it's just speculation. But then we had, in the beginning of this week, we had Patrushev and Wang Yi together, and obviously they get along famously. And obviously they monopolize the discussion because the other ones compared to them are, sorry to say, practically inexistent. Apart from Doval, the Indian security advisor, but he's not exactly on the same level as Wang Yi and Patrushev. And of course, they discussed matters of national intelligence and security at the highest level on the Russia-China strategic partnership as well. And then, of course, with the 5 BRICS, they said, okay, how are we going to harmonize all this with our partners? And how are we going to expand these interactions and conversations within BRICS Plus? So this was also discussed this week. In terms of the expansion itself, we have no detail. There has been no leaks whatsoever on the procedure in terms of BRICS Plus expansion. So we still don't know the mechanism. We still don't know how many they're going to admit next month, if they're going to admit next month, or there's going to be a list. We only know about everybody who applied. Everybody's on the list, everybody that expressed interest, etc. And that's over 30 nations. Now, soon we're going to have 40. And now with the Africans, soon we're going to have an avalanche of Africans as well. So any speculation for the moment, I think, is too premature. I prefer to wait for the results after the summit, and then we can have an extended conversation about that. The problem is, coming back to what we were discussing a few minutes ago, the intersection of the geoeconomic and the geopolitical platforms inside BRICS and pressures outside BRICS. And these Sherpas, as competent as they are, and some of them I happen to know they are really, really good, but they don't have a lot of international experience. And now they're going to have to do their homework in a matter of days and weeks. That's very, very difficult when you are preparing a summit that is not only for tomorrow, for the next few months. It's a summit that's going to have repercussions for the rest of the decade and the rest of the millennium, for that matter. So I think all of you can have an idea of how difficult this is, and it's basically hinging on the entente between Russia and China, getting India on board, and at least the three major BRICS having a common position on virtually every major dossier. We all know how hard it is. This is something that they cannot have, for instance, inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where the three of them are also members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And for instance, the latest summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was held virtually in India because the Indians didn't want to sit on the same table with China. It's simple as that. So this proves to you how complicated the whole thing is, So comes back to something that I heard from top-level Russian economic analysts. If you don't start by solving the problems inside BRICS, we're going to have a lot of trouble ahead, and we are still at this stage.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.